All right, this is it. This is part 7, the final part of my complete comprehensive guide to Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars role-playing game. Today we'll be talking about the Game Master and running the game, so how to use stats for NPCs, running adventures for the system, and creating some epic Star Wars campaigns. Well, this is it. This is the finale. Let's do this. So NPCs in the system are split into 3 different types. We have minions, rivals, and nemesis. They all have their own little roles and work a little bit differently, so we're going to jump into that in a second. So the NPC stat blocks in the book are actually really confusing and hard to manage and figure out. So I would suggest just using the website Star Wars Adversaries, using this link or the link in the description. This is a fan-made website that takes the confusing stat blocks of all the books you'll ever need, and puts them into a visual representation that just makes a lot of sense. It looks a lot more like character sheets. It's just way easier to read. Trust me, if you want to run encounters, make it easy, use this website. All right, so first up, let's talk about minions. These are the weakest of the weak. These are characters that don't really pose a threat individually, but in groups, they can actually become pretty dangerous. And that is how you're going to be mostly running these in combat, as groups, moving and acting as one. And so because of this concept, minions have a bit of a confusing rule set. So let's dive into it now. Okay, so first, unless otherwise stated, minion groups cannot suffer strain. So if an effect would cause them to suffer strain, they instead just suffer wounds instead. This also means they cannot voluntarily suffer strain, like to take a second maneuver on their turn or to activate some sort of power. Okay, so in combat, the Game Master can rule that a group of characters, NPCs, are just grouped up as a minion group. Instead of having to run, 15 stormtroopers individually, maybe the GM will just group them up into like 3 groups of 5 or something like that. So a minion group, essentially acts as a single NPC for the encounter. It just has one turn, it can only take one action, one maneuver. All the rules that apply to a single character apply to this minion group. Of course, there are a few differences. Their wound threshold, firstly, is the total wound threshold of every character. So let's say that you have a group of 3 stormtroopers, each with a wound threshold of 5. Therefore, a group of 3 stormtroopers has a wound threshold of 15. Soak is not added together, however. So since stormtroopers have a soak of 5, a group of stormtroopers, no matter how many are in that group, they still just have a soak of 5. Every time the group takes damage, it just gets added to the group, just like a normal character would, adding up to its total wound threshold. However, every time it passes an individual's wound threshold, one of the members of the group dies. So in our example, you have a group of 3 stormtroopers with a total wound threshold of 15. Every time you get past 5 wounds, one of those stormtroopers falls, and the group gets a little bit smaller. If a minion would ever suffer a critical injury, it just immediately dies. If a group of minions would suffer a critical injury, instead it just suffers an amount of wounds equal to the wound threshold of an individual minion. So in our example, if that group of 3 stormtroopers with a wound threshold of 15 suffered a critical hit, they instead just take 5 wounds, and one of those stormtroopers dies. Finally, minions do not have ranks in skills. They have a list of skills that they use, but they only gain ranks for each additional member of the group beyond the first. Okay, let's take stormtroopers, for example. Their skills are athletics, discipline, melee, and ranged heavy. If it is only a single stormtrooper, a single minion, and they have to make one of these rolls, they just make a normal roll without any proficiency dice, without any ranks in the skills. However, for each additional member of the group beyond the first, they gain a rank in each of these listed skills. So for example, a group of 3 stormtroopers would have 2 ranks in all of these skills. Obviously, each time one of them dies in the group, they will lose a rank in the skill. All right, so let's talk about rivals. Rivals are a lot stronger than minions. They act on their own, they don't form groups, and they're about the strength, a little bit weaker than a single player character. Kind of imagine just like a little bit lesser player character. Okay, so rivals do suffer critical injuries just like player characters do, just normally. However, should their wounds ever exceed their wound threshold, they just die. They don't fall unconscious or anything, they just die. Rivals cannot suffer strain. Should they ever suffer strain, they just suffer wounds instead. However, unlike minions, rivals can voluntarily suffer strain to like take a second maneuver or activate a talent or something like that. They just take the strain as wounds. Nemesis is the final one. Nemesis, you can think of them as the weakest Nemesis are equal to like one player character, but the strongest Nemesis are equal to face off against a whole party of player characters. Something like Darth Vader, I mean, you need a high-level party to even try to face off against him. Nemesis, they just work just like player characters. They don't have any special rules regarding them. So, as you can probably assume, one person in your gaming group is the game master. So this is a person who runs the game, just like a dungeon master would in D&D. This is the most fulfilling, satisfying job you could possibly have. It's so much fun, but it is a ton of work. Now, I've GM'd in this system for a very long time, and even though every session I've put a lot of work into it, it's always so satisfying and fulfilling every time I play a session. Even if you're still not super confident in understanding this system and the rules, just jump in, start running a game. Look, worst thing that can happen, you come upon a situation that has a rule for it, that you don't know the rule, quickly skim through the books, you can't find an answer to it. Just come up with an answer, do something that in the system that you do understand that maybe could work, that's similar, and then just keep moving on. Just like running a game in any system, it takes practice and time to get a handle on how the system works, how it runs, all that kind of stuff. So to get the GM and the players familiar with the system, before starting a campaign, I would always suggest running a pre-made published one-shot or one of their mini campaigns that they've published first. Don't spend too much time prepping, building characters, writing backstories. Just quickly roll up some characters so you can learn a little bit about character creation, run the one-shot. There's low stakes, it's not a big deal. Everyone can make mistakes, get some things wrong. It's just to get a handle of the system. And hey, if you finish the one-shot or one of the little mini campaigns that they provide in one of the published books, and you all liked it, now you can go ahead, sit down, and actually start a real campaign, invest time into prepping it, invest time into building character sheets and backstories, all that kind of stuff. But only if you really like the system. You can find pre-made one-shots at the end of every core rulebook, a different one for every rulebook, and in the starter sets as well. Hey, so if you play the one-shot, you want to start a campaign, but still as a game master, you're still not feeling super confident in the system and all that kind of stuff, something you could do is start your campaign, but have the first arc of the campaign be one of the published adventures. So I did this for my very first campaign. I took one of the published adventures, Mask of the Pirate Queen, and I just used that as the first arc for my campaign because I was still getting a handle on the rules and things. And then I just tweaked some things. I changed some NPCs out, changed some story beats to fit the campaign that we were playing, and I wanted to do some setup for the rest of the campaign that I had imagined. So there are 2 fully published 3-part adventures for every one of the 3 different games, Edge of the Empire, Age of Rebellion, Force, and Destiny. So that means that there are 6 published adventures total. They all have different themes and story concepts and stuff like that. So I would say research how each of them works, what's kind of the theme of each one, to choose the best one to kick off your campaign. All right, so when you finally get to the point where you want to start a campaign, I would always suggest running a session 0 first. So the first session you guys sit down together is going to be a session 0. So you're not kicking off the campaign just yet, but this is a session where you can build characters together, still get acquainted with the rules and all that kind of stuff, and also have a conversation about the kind of campaign you want to play. All right, so here are the steps I would suggest taking with your group when you sit down for a session 0. All right, the first thing you should probably figure out is what era of Star Wars are you going to be playing in. There are 4 eras with published material for them with the system. So an era like the Old Republic, maybe you guys are all fans of it or something, will have no published material for it. So no classes, NPC stats, adventures for that era. Of course, you can still totally use this rule set to play a campaign in that era. Just understand there's not going to be really any published material for you to pull off of. So the first era you can do is Rise of the Separatists. This is going to be early Clone Wars, and they have a book called Rise of the Separatists that you can check out that details running campaigns for this era. The second era you can choose is Collapse of the Republic. This is the end of the Clone Wars. This is around episode 3 of Star Wars. And if you want to play this one, there's a book for that one as well. Okay, the third era is going to be Dawn of Rebellion. This takes place between episodes 3 and 4, so around the times of the show Rebels, the movie Rogue One, the show Andor, that era. Fourth one is going to be the Age of the Empire, which is my personal favorite. That's going to be taking place between episodes 4 and 6. As you know by now, the bulk of published material for this game takes place in the Age of the Empire. The core rulebooks, a lot of the published adventures, they all take place in this setting. So if you're a fan of this setting and you want a lot of material that you can pull from, highly suggest using this one. Okay, next up you want to decide what kind of genre you want your game to kind of be focused on. Of course, you can pull from different sorts, but in general, I have seen that Star Wars kind of has 3 central genres. The first is the Force, light side versus dark side, mysticism, magic side of Star Wars. The second is military conflict. In the Clone Wars, of course, you have the Separatists and the Republic. And then in the Age of the Empire, you have the Empire versus the Rebellion, so military conflict. And then finally, there's the scum and villainy side of Star Wars, the criminal underbelly, smuggling and, arms trading and all that kind of stuff is all the scum and villainy side. So you and your group should decide what kinds of stuff do we want to focus on in this campaign so that everyone can kind of put in their 2 cents of what they want to be getting out of a Star Wars adventure. Third, I would choose the morality you want for the campaign, kind of just the central focus of how stories are going to be being told here. Are all the player characters going to be generally good? Are they going to be more like mercenaries, kind of more neutral, morally gray characters? This allows the game master to be able to create adventures with motivations that make sense for the players. If the GM creates an adventure and the motivation to go on this adventure is to save someone or to protect the weak or, to save a village, the characters need to be pretty good aligned characters for this to actually motivate them. But if you guys have decided that your group is mostly morally gray, mercenary, neutral, then maybe the GM will create adventures where the motivation is a job that they get paid for, should they go about and do that adventure. Fourthly, you want to choose the impact on canon that your story will have. You all want to be able to talk and figure out how much you want your story to impact canon. Is it going to be totally separate? We're not going to meet named characters or named events or anything like that. Or are you going to be able to, kill Anakin or whatever, you know what I mean? Kidnap Princess Leia or whatever to totally change canon. You just want to be able to discuss this as the group. Okay, then you're going to want to balance the 3 scales of tabletop RPGs, right? Combat, exploration, and role-playing. If you find that most of the group mostly loves combat the most, put a ton of combat in your game. If you find that the majority of your group really likes a lot of role-playing, put a lot of role-playing in your game. Now, you'll probably find that people in your group have different varying levels for each of these 3 things. So usually your campaign's going to come out pretty balanced, but this is just good to get a read on for your group so you know how much to include in your campaign. All right, and finally, you want to be able to establish boundaries. Everyone should be able to feel comfortable while playing the game, not be put into any awkward situations. So during session 0, you want to be able to discuss what are the things that should be allowed and should not be allowed in your game, and the GM can just totally avoid those things when creating the stories, characters, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's it. That wraps up this How to Play series for the Star Wars role-playing game system. Feel free to share these videos with your friends, your players, your game master, whatever, so that everyone can learn together. I have got some really exciting stuff planned for this channel, so keep an eye out, and I'll see you next time.